Good morning, everybody. I know it's kind of weird to see a pre-recorded one on a Tuesday, but I got a call this morning and have a bit of an emergency to deal with my parents, so I'm going to quick deal with that. But first, I'll record this and get this on before I head out. This is going to be a little bit shorter one, but we're going to continue with Adam Hamilton's Living Unafraid, and this chapter is titled When Jesus Was Afraid. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." He said to them, "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that, if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." That's from Mark chapter 14, verses 32 through 36. It's troubling for some to imagine Jesus being afraid. He's the Son of God, so how can he be afraid? But in his time on earth, while Jesus was the Son of God, he was also, the creeds tell us, fully human. To be human is to experience fear. He had the same defense mechanisms as we do, the same fundamental drive to stay alive. On that Thursday evening of Holy Week, after the supper, Jesus led the disciples to the Mount of Olives, to a place where the olives were pressed. There Jesus went to pray, knowing that at any moment Judas, his betrayer, would arrive with the temple guard to arrest him. The next morning he would be tortured to death by the Roman soldiers. His brain's amygdala was doing what it was created to do. It was preparing his body to fight or to flee. His heart was beating hard and fast. His breathing had become shallow. His palms were likely sweaty, and his mouth probably dry. His heart and mind were filled with an overwhelming sense of dread, the body's way of motivating a person to act for self-preservation. If you wrestle with panic attacks or anxiety, you know these feelings well. Listen once more to how Mark describes what Jesus was experiencing. He began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." Fear was doing what fear is meant to do. It is meant to motivate us to run. But Jesus did not run, and he didn't plan to fight. Instead, he fell to the ground and prayed that, if possible, the hour might pass from him. He had anticipated his death from the beginning of his public ministry. Here, as he wrestled with the path of suffering that lay before him, Jesus prayed, "Take this cup of pain and suffering away from me." Yet, though it was God's own Son who prayed this prayer, God did not take the cup from him. He strengthened Jesus, walked with him, no doubt agonized with and for him. But Jesus still endured the cross. Ultimately, God did deliver him from death at Easter, using the suffering of Jesus for his saving purposes. In our lives, too, suffering comes, and we, like Jesus, pray for the cup to pass from us. God strengthens us, walks with us, agonizes with and for us, and ultimately delivers us. And if we allow him, God will use our suffering redemptively in our lives. Jesus' prayer, "Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will," is a pattern of prayer for such moments in our lives. We lay our petition before God, and we yield our will to God's will. Was it God's will that Jesus be betrayed, arrested, humiliated, and then tortured to death? No. God doesn't want cruelty and inhumanity. God's will was to redeem and save the human race, to unveil on the cross the depth of humanity's moral depravity, and to reveal the greatness of God's extravagant mercy, to demonstrate love's width and length, height and depth. And, coupled with the resurrection, to proclaim God's decisive victory over evil, hate, sin, and death. The suffering and death of Christ were the means by which God hoped to save the world, a world that includes me and you. Suffering will sometimes come in our life. Our brains are designed to protect us from it. Fear is the mechanism intended to lead us to fight or flee. Sometimes we can't run from suffering or fight it, but we can only endure it. And when that is the case, we pray for God's will to be done through it. He may not have willed the suffering, but he wills but he wills to use it redemptively, to force good to come from it. This is always an important part of the life of Jesus. This is a part when, in some accounts, God actually does open a way for Jesus to get out. The trees parted before him. He had an opportunity to escape, to let his fear win out, and to run. But he does not. Now, a lot of us, we say, well, that's the will of God. Well, yeah, that is the will of God, but it's also the will of Christ to obediently follow in that path. Many times we are given an opportunity to run from what God has called us to do. Would we have the same courage Christ had? So to me, I always look at the story of the Garden of Gethsemane as a story of Christ's overwhelming love for us, that he knew what was before him. He had an opportunity to run and chose instead to remain, knowing full well what was about to happen. That is the greatest indication of the love he has for each of us. Throughout our life, we will face many instances of suffering. It's a fact of life. We will face loss of loved ones. We will face anxiety and stress from our jobs. We will face physical stress from our bodies simply just not functioning properly. We will face all sorts of problems, of trials, of tribulations. But again, as I said Sunday, the stories never end with our trials and tribulations. The stories end when God decrees it to end. And while God does not will our suffering, does not wish for us to suffer that great fall, he is able to use our suffering to help in a redemptive fashion. He is able to use what we've gone through in our life to help others. And that might be through our own actions, what we do after we've faced our trials. Maybe we're the vessel that God uses to help others. When you face those moments of trial, keep faith and know that God is still with you and will walk the path beside you. And now I offer the prayer from the end of the chapter. Father, my suffering is nothing compared with that of your Son, but like him, I pray for the cup to pass from me. If I must endure it, please strengthen me and walk with me. Use the suffering I pass through for your good purposes. I trust that, ultimately, you will deliver me from evil, and may my prayer always be this: not my will, but thy will be done. Again, I'm sorry that this was a pre-recorded bit. Had a little bit of a family emergency that I'm going to try and address here quickly. Nothing terribly serious, so don't worry. But before I do, I will take a left turn before I take a right turn, and we'll head to the United Methodist Church in Jessup, where I will cast my ballot. For those of you who have voted early, good. For those of you who haven't voted early and still have yet to vote, do so. It is election day, and the important thing is that you have made your voice heard. I know that there are many in my churches who will agree with who I vote for. Many in my churches who will vote for the other side. Many in my churches who might vote for an entirely different candidate besides the two main ones. The important thing is that we do not let this election completely destroy the bonds that our church has formed. We also make our voice heard. So whenever you do it, polls are open 7 a.m., so about an hour ago, to 9 p.m. So make sure you, at some point today, have gone and cast your ballot for whoever you feel is best able to lead our country. So that is all I'll say about the election today. Have a good day. Let grace and love come before hate and anger. And I will see you all hopefully in a more live stream tomorrow. Just a reminder to keep the family of Don Haish in your prayers. The funeral is Thursday at 11 with a visitation an hour beforehand, and that will be at the United Methodist Church here in Brandon. So, and if you do wish to attend, please wear masks. This is not, just because it's not a normal Sunday worship does not mean the mask rule goes without saying. So please wear protection and masks as appropriate. So, other than that, I will see you all sometime, hopefully tomorrow, during a live stream. But who knows? Life's funny that way. So have a good day, everybody.